Hey guys, Tammy here. And in this video, we're going to talk about what is important to the court in child custody. A lot of times, things that parents feel are important are things that they end up in front of the judge and they realize that the court doesn't feel as concerned about them as they do. Now, real quick, let me remind you, if you like these videos, please hit like and also subscribe to the channel so you get notified when new videos are released. So let's look at this from the court's perspective. A lot of times what we're expecting is we're expecting the court to manage our ex, right? We're expecting the court to stop the conflict or make them step up and parent the way they should, or make them step up and parent as often as we feel they should, or, validate us that they're such a jerk, or different issues like that. And that's not really what the court's there to decide. The court's there to decide what is the best parenting schedule for these children or this child. How do they determine that? Well, many states, depending on the age of the child, but many states are trending more and more towards joint custody. And a lot of people think 50-50 means joint custody, and it doesn't specifically mean 50-50. It just means a high level of involvement from both parents. So usually if you have one parent has at least 30% or so, generally the court will call that joint custody. What you want to do is really understand what it is the court is focused on when they're creating these parenting plans for kids. And of course, as I've talked about and I harp about a lot, the number one issue is safety, the safety of the children. We get into a little problem with this issue because what happens is people talk a lot about their evidence, about what evidence they have and what evidence they don't. One of the things that Thomas always used to say is you need to understand that your testimony or your declaration or your affidavit or whatever written statement that you're putting into the court, as well as your oral testimony in court, are pieces of evidence. You also have physical evidence, right? We have tangible evidence like we have text messages, or we have pictures, or we have recordings or examples of certain things that also become evidence. But sometimes people think that if they don't have physical evidence, they therefore don't have any evidence. And that's not true. Your testimony is evidence. The problem with the testimony is a lot of times it is he said, she said, right? So we've got competing testimonies. And this is why I talk about credibility a lot, because when you come into competing testimonies, your credibility in front of the court becomes very, very crucial in that situation. Now, this is why the courts start with the big picture issues. They start with safety and they start with things that they have physical evidence of, because physical evidence becomes a tiebreaker on the testimonial evidence, right? Because if I have one parent saying, yeah, this is true, and the other parent saying, no, this isn't true, but then the other parent has a picture or a message or something confirming what they're saying, then obviously I've just tipped the scales in my favor. Let me give you an example. Thomas had a client a few years ago who he had the dad, and this couple wasn't married, and they were arguing over custody over, I believe the child was around 8 years old. And mom was saying that she had concerns over dad's drinking. Dad got on the stand and he testified that he did not drink, that never happened, that he rarely, if ever, drank, that he didn't party, all these kinds of things. And then mom pulled out a picture and said, isn't this you in this picture? And it was a picture of him with his arm around some girl that wasn't her. And there was a big old bottle of vodka sitting in the that he was holding actually in the foreground, that he clearly was partying. And so that obviously really swayed the judge, and the guy lost the case. So we have to understand first and foremost, what is it that's important to the judge? And those safety issues of drugs, alcohol, physical abuse, things that are really, that I call like child welfare issues, things that we would be calling child welfare over. Those are the most important things to the court. And the reason for that is because every set of parents standing in front of the court have conflict. Every set of parents feels like the other parent isn't a good parent. They're difficult. They have complaints about them, whatever. Not every parent that goes through divorce feels that way, but most of the time, parents that don't feel that way about the other parent, usually you're in mediation, or you reach agreement or settlement, or you have some alternative form of resolving your situation. People that end up in front of the court that have a lot of litigation and are in the court recurring over and over and over again are people that feel like there are issues around the other parent. But the court isn't there to decide who's the better parent. That's not what's important to them. That's not even something they weigh in on, or whether that other parent meets the minimum threshold of the standard they hold themselves to as a parent. All of us are different. Really, if you're talking about safety issues, if you're talking about education issues, if you're talking about mental health issues, therapy, if a child's having behaviors like cutting, again, different tangible things that show there's a problem. And this is why we like to get the therapist involved very early on, because sometimes you have a child that's having stress or anxiety, or they're having suicidal ideations, and yet there's no necessarily tangible proof of that, except for your, all you have is your testimony and the other parent's testimony. And if the other parent is in denial about this is happening, what physical evidence do you have? You don't. And this is why the therapist becomes so critical, because then a therapist kind of becomes the child's voice and can say, hey, I've been seeing the child for this long, and the child is having these issues. That's going to be really important in your child custody situation. Your judge is going to care about that, but your judge isn't going to care about things that are conflict between the two of you, things that, one of you says is happening, the other one denies, and there's no third party sort of proof of it or physical evidence of it or whatever. And it's just these accusations flying. This is when, our case becomes really, really difficult, because we know it's happening, but we don't really have any proof. And sometimes the more that you try to assert and push that this really is happening, I have seen that backfire on people, and they start to become labeled as the problem because they're so adamant that this is happening, even though the judge is saying, I don't really see any concrete evidence of this. And those are the times that you have to step back and start to keep your records, keep your documents, keep your logs, and try to wait for that tangible evidence, that physical evidence to come, because in my experience, it will come. It's just a matter of having the patience to wait for it. So remember, the things your judges most focus on is safety issues, education, therapy, mental health issues. Those are key components. Things that involve your conflict with the other parent, disagreements, or things that are really just inconveniences that I know can be difficult, that can drive you nuts, is not really what the court is there to help resolve. So if you'd like to learn more about my coaching, please go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. There's a link on that page that you can use to book a free strategy session with me, and I'd love to talk to you. See you in the next video.